the Queen of Cocaine, inspired by true crime stories. Welcome to Crime Stories PH, where we uncover the darkest secrets hidden in plain sight. Today, we bring you the Queen of Cocaine. Country, Colombia. Inspired by Griselda Blanco. In 1980s Medellin, a ruthless woman rises through the cartel ranks to become the most feared drug lord in South America, leaving a trail of blood, betrayal, and broken alliances in her wake. This is Crime Stories PH, where truth is stranger than fiction. The Queen of Cocaine. Blood money. The first time Isabella Reyes killed someone, she was just 12 years old. That day in the slums of Medellin, Colombia, she learned two things that would shape her entire empire. Death was a business transaction, and fear was the ultimate currency. It was 1967 when Isabella plunged a rusty kitchen knife into the chest of her mother's abusive boyfriend. As he gasped his final breaths on their dirt floor, Isabella didn't run. She simply watched the light fade from his eyes and felt nothing. This void within her, this ability to execute without emotion, would eventually make her the most powerful woman in the Colombian drug trade. And most feared. They would call her La Reina, the Queen. But queens aren't born. They're forged in fire, blood, and unimaginable sacrifice. This is the story of how a desperate girl from the barrios transformed herself into the most ruthless narco-trafficker of her generation. A woman who would outmaneuver the DEA, outmuscle rival cartels, and outlive almost everyone who dared cross her path. Her rise to power wasn't just unprecedented, it was impossible. In a male-dominated world of South American drug trafficking, women served two purposes: to pleasure the men or to package the product. Isabella Reyes would change that forever. Welcome to the brutal, blood-soaked saga of La Reina de Cocaina, the woman who built her throne on bodies, her fortune on white powder, and her legacy on fear. Isabella's journey into the criminal underworld began long before that first killing. Born to a teenage prostitute in Medellin's most dangerous neighborhood, she grew up in a world where survival meant looking the other way when men came calling for her mother. By age 10, she was picking pockets in the market. By 15, she was moving packages for local dealers. Small-time stuff, marijuana, cheap pills. But Isabella had vision beyond her circumstances. She studied how power worked in her world. While other girls dreamed of escaping the barrio through marriage, Isabella saw something else: opportunity. When she turned 18 in 1973, Colombia's cocaine trade was still in its infancy. The white powder began as a curiosity, a luxury item for wealthy Americans looking for a better high than what the hippie era had offered. Isabella recognized its potential before almost anyone else in Medellin, not just as a drug, but as a catalyst for power. She seduced Carlos Vasquez, a mid-level trafficker twice her age who had connections to suppliers in Bolivia. Their relationship wasn't about love, it was about leverage. Carlos had access, Isabella had ambition. People always underestimate a beautiful woman, she told her closest friend Sophia. That's their mistake. Beauty is just another weapon in my arsenal. But Carlos was old-school machismo. He saw Isabella as arm candy, a trophy to display to his associates. Her opinions on business were dismissed with patronizing smiles. So Isabella waited. She learned. She watched. She memorized the networks, the contacts, the methods. And then, 18 months into their relationship, Carlos made a fatal error. The betrayal. The night everything changed began with champagne and ended in blood. It was supposed to be a celebration. Carlos had just completed a major shipment to Miami. 20 kilos of the purest cocaine ever to hit American shores. The payment, $2 million in cash. Money that would elevate Carlos from mid-level dealer to major player. Isabella poured the champagne that night as Carlos and his 3 lieutenants toasted their success in the luxury apartment they shared. She smiled and played her part, the supportive girlfriend, the beautiful distraction. Carlos was already drunk on power and alcohol when he slapped her backside and announced his men, "Once we expand, I'm trading this one in for a newer model. Maybe 2. The men laughed. Isabella smiled along, but something cold crystallized in her chest. Later, as Carlos snored beside her, Isabella slipped from the bed and made a phone call. 3 hours later, she stood in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Medellin, facing Alejandro Duran, Carlos's supplier and biggest rival. "I know where he keeps the money," Isabella said, her voice steady despite the fear flickering in her stomach. "And I know his distribution network in Miami. Names, addresses, everything." Alejandro studied her through narrowed eyes. "Why should I trust you?" "Because Carlos is planning to cut you out. He's made contact with the Bolivians directly." This wasn't true, but Isabella knew it was Carlos's ambition to do exactly that. The seed of doubt was all Alejandro needed. "And what do you want in return?" Alejandro asked. Isabella's answer would change the course of Colombian criminal history. A partnership. 24 hours later, Carlos Vasquez and his 3 lieutenants were found executed in their apartment. The $2 million was gone. So was Isabella. Within a month, Isabella Reyes and Alejandro Duran had doubled the Miami distribution network. Within 6 months, they controlled cocaine trafficking throughout Florida. And within a year, Alejandro would also be dead, mysteriously poisoned at a business dinner, leaving Isabella as the sole heir to their expanding empire. La Reina was born. By 1976, Isabella had established herself as a force within Colombia's burgeoning cocaine trade, but she remained virtually unknown to American authorities. The DEA was focused on male kingpins, never suspecting that a 27-year-old woman was orchestrating shipments worth tens of millions of dollars. Isabella's innovation was simple but brilliant. She recruited other women, mothers, girlfriends, daughters of men in the trade, women who had been overlooked and undervalued. She recognized their potential where the male-dominated cartels saw only objects. Men see women as their weakness, she told her growing inner circle. "We will make women our strength." Isabella created the Viudas, widows, an elite network of female couriers and distributors who moved product with unprecedented efficiency. They smuggled cocaine in baby formula cans and hollowed-out high heels, sewn into wigs, and even surgically implanted within their bodies. The authorities rarely suspected them. As her power grew, so did Isabella's paranoia. She never stayed in one place for more than a few nights. She employed food tasters. She kept a constant rotation of bodyguards, young men who were fiercely loyal but who knew nothing of her larger operation. And she became increasingly ruthless. The Miami Massacre, September 10th, 1978. The Mutiny Hotel in Coconut Grove, Miami. The city was the cocaine capital of America, and the Mutiny was its unofficial headquarters, a playground for drug lords, celebrities, and corrupt politicians. Money flowed like water, and cocaine was more common than cocktails. Isabella sat at her regular table in the back corner of the restaurant, sipping champagne with Sophia, her childhood friend who now managed her Miami distribution. To anyone watching, they appear to be just 2 wealthy Latin American women enjoying lunch. Only Sophia noticed how Isabella's eyes tracked Raul Diaz as he entered the restaurant, the charming Dominican who had quickly risen to become her top distributor in the northeastern United States. Raul kissed Isabella's cheek, taking the seat across from her. "You've been busy," Isabella said, her voice casual. Boston, New York, Philadelphia, all reporting record sales. Raul smiled, signaling the waiter for a drink. What can I say? Americans love their snow. The conversation continued pleasantly. They discussed business, Miami gossip, Raul's new Ferrari. But beneath the table, Isabella's hand gripped Sophia's wrist with increasing pressure. When Raul excused himself to use the restroom, Isabella leaned close to Sophia. "He's skimming," she whispered. "Almost $1 million in the last 3 shipments." Sophia's eyes widened. "Are you sure? I've been tracking the numbers myself. And he's been meeting with the Ochoa family." The Ochoas were rivals, an up-and-coming family in the Medellin drug trade. If Raul was talking to them, he wasn't just stealing, he was planning to defect. "What are you going to do?" Sophia asked. Isabella merely sipped her champagne. "What needs to be done?" When Raul returned, the conversation resumed as if nothing had changed. They finished lunch, and Raul invited them to continue the celebration at his new waterfront mansion in Key Biscayne. He mentioned he had other associates there, important people Isabella should meet. Isabella agreed with a smile. 3 hours later, the Miami police received multiple calls about gunfire at Raul's mansion. By the time officers arrived, they found a bloodbath, 7 men and 2 women executed, including Raul Diaz. The killers had vanished, along with any cocaine and cash that might have been present. What investigators didn't know was that Isabella had arrived with 6 of her most trusted viudas, all carrying concealed weapons. The meeting was a setup. Raul had indeed been planning to defect to the Ochoa family, and the associates at his home were there to finalize the arrangement. Isabella had walked in, confirmed her suspicions, and ordered the execution of everyone present. No warnings, no second chances, a message written in blood. The Miami Massacre, as newspapers called it, remained unsolved. But within the underworld, the message was clear: betrayal of La Reina meant death. As the 1970s gave way to the 1980s, cocaine transformed from the indulgence of the elite to the epidemic of the masses. The introduction of crack cocaine to American streets opened new markets and multiplied profits. Isabella's operation grew exponentially, and her wealth became almost immeasurable. She purchased vast estates throughout Colombia, luxury apartments in Miami, in New York, private islands in the Caribbean. Her charitable foundations built schools and hospitals in Medellin's poorest neighborhoods, a calculated move to secure loyalty from the communities where she recruited. But success made Isabella a target. The Colombian and American authorities intensified their hunt for the mysterious woman now rumored to be controlling a significant portion of the cocaine trade. Rival cartels, including the rising Cali organization and Pablo Escobar's Medellin group, began encroaching on her territory. Isabella responded with characteristic brutality. The bodies of rivals and suspected informants appeared with alarming frequency. Some were found dismembered, others with the distinct signature of Isabella's enforcers. A single bullet between the eyes followed by lipstick marks on the victim's forehead. The kiss of La Reina. The alliance. By 1982, the cocaine trade had grown too big for any single organization to control. Violence between competing cartels threatened to bring unwanted attention from authorities. A solution was needed. The meeting was unprecedented. The heads of Colombia's major drug organizations gathering under one roof to discuss cooperation rather than competition. The location, a heavily guarded hacienda in the remote mountains outside Medellin. Isabella arrived last, making a calculated entrance. Where the male cartel leaders came with entourages of heavily armed men, she arrived with just 2 bodyguards and her inner circle of viudas. Her message was clear. She feared no one in that room. Pablo Escobar, already infamous for his ruthlessness, watched with barely concealed disdain as Isabella took her seat at the table. At 33, she was the youngest leader present and the only woman. "Gentlemen," she said, breaking the tense silence, "we're killing each other while the Americans laugh and count their victories. This needs to end." "And you propose what exactly?" asked Gilberto Rodriguez Orihuela of the Cali cartel, her most formidable rival after Escobar. "An alliance," Isabella said simply. "Divided territories, shared transportation networks, coordinated bribes to officials, united front against law enforcement." The discussion lasted hours, frequently erupting into heated arguments. Escobar, in particular, resisted the idea of ceding any control or authority. The breaking point came when he slammed his fist on the table. "Why should any of us listen to a woman? Your place is in the bedroom, not the boardroom." The room fell silent. Everyone knew of Isabella's reputation for dealing with disrespect. She smiled coolly at Escobar. "Pablo, we can work together or against each other. But make no mistake, if it's against each other, only one of us will survive. And I've outlived everyone who's ever underestimated me." The tension was broken by Gilberto Rodriguez Orihuela, who recognized the practicality of cooperation. "La Reina is right. United, we control the trade. Divided, we give the Americans easy targets." By dawn, a historic agreement was reached, the formation of what would later be known as La Corporación, a cartel of cartels that would dominate the global cocaine trade for years to come. Each leader would maintain autonomy within their territories, but coordinate on larger matters of mutual interest. Isabella had achieved what many thought impossible, forcing men like Escobar to accept her as an equal. But she harbored no illusions about the fragility of their alliance. That night, she doubled her security and began making contingency plans. The alliance would bring unprecedented wealth to all involved. It would also set the stage for the bloodiest chapter in Colombia's drug war. The period from 1982 to 1984 marked the golden age of Colombian cocaine trafficking. La Corporación moved hundreds of tons of cocaine worth billions of dollars. Politicians, police, and judges were on cartel payrolls. The Colombian economy itself became dependent on drug money. Isabella expanded beyond cocaine, diversifying into legitimate businesses, construction companies, banks, media outlets. She became a phantom figure, rarely seen in public, yet whispered about everywhere. But paradise never lasts. The assassination of Colombian Justice Minister Rodrigo Lara Bonilla in 1984, ordered by Escobar against the wishes of other cartel leaders, brought unprecedented heat from both Colombian and U.S. authorities. The betrayal from within. November 1984. Isabella's primary residence, a fortified estate outside Medellin. Isabella sat alone in her study, reviewing financial reports from her Miami operations. The numbers didn't add up. Again, for the third consecutive month, profits were significantly lower than projected. She summoned her financial advisor, Ricardo Fuentes, a brilliant accountant who had managed her books for 5 years. Ricardo entered nervously, adjusting his glasses as he always did when anxious. "Explain this," Isabella said, pointing to the discrepancies. Ricardo offered technical explanations: exchange rate fluctuations, increased transportation costs, higher bribes to officials. Isabella listened patiently, her face revealing nothing. When he finished, she simply asked, "Who approached you, BA or Cali?" Ricardo's face drained of color. "I don't understand." "Don't insult me," Isabella interrupted, her voice dangerously soft. "You've been siphoning money and information for months. I want to know who turned you." Ricardo's composure crumbled. He fell to his knees, confessing that DEA agents had caught him in a compromising situation with underage girls. A setup. They threatened to expose him unless he cooperated, providing financial records and information about shipments. How many shipments have they intercepted because of you? Isabella asked. 3 major ones, Ricardo admitted, trembling. But I swear I never gave him your name or location. I only provided financial data. Isabella nodded thoughtfully. Stand up, Ricardo. You've been loyal for many years. One mistake doesn't erase that. Relief washed over his face as Isabella walked to the bar and poured 2 glasses of whiskey. She handed one to Ricardo. To loyalty, she said, raising her glass. Ricardo drank gratefully. Within minutes, he began gasping for breath, clawing at his throat as the poison took effect. Isabella watched impassively as he collapsed, convulsing on her imported Persian rug. Your children will be provided for, she told his dying form. I promise you that when you join me, and I keep my promises. After Ricardo's death, Isabella launched a purge of her organization, eliminating anyone with even suspected connections to law enforcement. Simultaneously, she accelerated a plan she'd been developing for months, a controlled withdrawal from direct involvement in day-to-day operations. She promoted Sofia to oversee all U.S. distribution and appointed regional managers for her Colombian operations. Isabella herself would become even more removed, communicating through multiple layers of intermediaries. What she didn't realize was that the DEA had already identified her, and they were closing in. By early 1985, the combined efforts of Colombian police and American DEA agents had begun to seriously disrupt the operations of La Corporación. The alliance Isabella had helped forge was showing cracks as leaders blamed each other for security breaches. The fall. May 14, 1985. A luxury high-rise apartment in Bogotá. Isabella had broken her own rules by staying in one location for more than 3 days. But the apartment belonged to a senior government official who was on her payroll, and she believed it to be completely secure. She was in the middle of a shower when she heard the first explosion, a breach charge blowing open the apartment's reinforced door. She reacted instantly. Grabbing a pistol, she kept wrapped in waterproof material inside the shower itself. Naked and dripping, Isabella fired through the bathroom door, hearing a grunt as one of her bullets found target. She quickly pulled on a robe and assessed her options. The apartment was on the 15th floor, too high to jump. The only exit was through the main door, now controlled by what she assumed were police or DEA agents. Isabella activated the emergency protocol, pressing a hidden button that would alert her security team in the building. But no help came. She had been betrayed again. Using the bedroom furniture as a barricade, she held off the assault for nearly 20 minutes, killing 2 agents in the process. But when her ammunition ran out, reality set in. The Queen of Cocaine was cornered. Rather than surrender, Isabella swallowed what appeared to be a cyanide capsule she kept on a chain around her neck. The DEA agents broke through just in time to see her collapse. But Isabella Reyes had cheated death once again. The capsule contained a powerful sedative, not poison, a contingency she had planned for just such a situation. By the time she was revived at the hospital, her lawyers were already negotiating with authorities. The official announcement shocked the world. Isabella Reyes, alleged to be the mysterious La Reina, had died during the raid. Her body was cremated immediately, an unusual procedure that raised eyebrows but was explained away as cultural custom. In reality, Isabella had played her final and most brilliant card. For years, she had cultivated a relationship with a high-ranking CIA official who saw her as potentially valuable in the U.S. government's escalating conflicts with communist guerrillas in Colombia. In exchange for intelligence on leftist rebel groups and certain rival traffickers, Isabella was given a new identity and relocated to an undisclosed location, presumed to be somewhere in Europe. The woman who entered the witness protection program was not Isabella Reyes, but a surgically altered body double. The real Isabella disappeared with millions in offshore accounts, leaving behind an organization that quickly fragmented without her leadership. The legacy: Medellin, Colombia. Present day. The elderly woman sits in a modest apartment overlooking the city that was once the epicenter of her empire. At 74, her once legendary beauty has faded, but her eyes remain sharp and calculating. On the television, a documentary plays, one of many about the Colombian drug wars of the 1980s. The narrator mentions La Reina only briefly, describing her as a minor figure who met a violent end during a police raid in 1985. The woman smiles faintly. Her greatest achievement was not the billions she earned or the network she built, but her own erasure from history. While Pablo Escobar became a household name and the subject of countless books and films, Isabella Reyes faded into obscurity, exactly as she had planned. The apartment buzzer sounds. She checks the security camera and buzzes in a young woman in her 20s, her granddaughter, though the girl doesn't know the true identity of the great aunt she visits weekly. "I brought you these," the young woman says, handing over a box of pastries and the latest mystery novel from the bookstore where she works. "Thank you, my dear," the older woman replies. She notices a bruise on her granddaughter's wrist, poorly concealed by makeup. "Your boyfriend again?" The girl looks away, embarrassed. "He has a temper, but he loves me." The old woman's eyes harden momentarily with a familiar coldness that would have been instantly recognizable to anyone who knew La Reina in her prime. "No man has the right to hurt you," she says, taking her granddaughter's hand. "Perhaps it's time I told you some stories about your family, about strength, about survival." As twilight falls over Medellin, the woman once known as the Queen of Cocaine begins to share a carefully edited version of her life story, presenting herself as merely adjacent to the power she once wielded. But the lessons she imparts are real, about a world where women must create their own power, where strength is confused with brutality, and where survival sometimes comes at the cost of one's soul. 3 days later, her granddaughter's abusive boyfriend disappears without a trace. The police investigation goes nowhere. The case is eventually forgotten, just another unexplained disappearance in a city with a long history of them. And in her quiet apartment, Isabella Reyes tends to her orchids, reads her mystery novels, and occasionally opens a hidden safe containing a single item: a tube of the distinctive red lipstick she once used to mark the foreheads of those who betrayed her. Some habits die hard, even for queens in exile. The end.